las personas que están arriba, nosotros en ese orden, las personas que están en el sur. En la bienvenida, yo soy Karen Cubillas, soy parte del proyecto de seguridad de relaciones internacionales y pues te soy la bienvenida en este otro house donde LondonSchoolofEconomics. Antes de darle la palabra a Nathan Brand, nuestro representante de LSE, después de que Colegio tiene convenio con LondonSchoolofEconomics, le da una beca del 100% a un integrante del semillero de talentos y un descuento del 20% de matrícula a todos los demás. Entonces, Brand, it is great to have you tonight. So, yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. I would not come and listen to me on a Thursday night. So thank you so much for choosing to come and learn a bit about LSE. I recognise, I think, a few people I might have met earlier this week at the fair. So it's nice to see some people again. But whether you're with me in the room or online, yeah, thank you so much for coming and listening. So, as per the warm welcome, my name is Nathan, if we haven't met before, and I'm based at London School of Economics. And I have, I guess, quite a nice job because I get to come to places like this and meet with people like you who are normally pretty nice people, but normally also very motivated, right? And right now you are thinking about your future and things you would like to do. And hopefully I can help you out a bit tonight with that thinking, and we'll talk about LSE. But I always like to start this presentation by saying as well that I was also an LSE student. Okay? So I did my bachelor's and my master's degree with LSE. In case anyone cares, that was in history. There's no future in it. That was a joke. Thank you. I just need one person to look for them, and then I'm happy. Joanna at the back has heard that joke probably more times than I've ever visited this country. So thank you. And so what we'll do tonight is over the next, I guess, an hour or so, I'm going to provide a bit of an introduction to LSE. But what I'm really going to try and focus on tonight is a little bit more on the admissions process. Because right now, for those of you who are, in the middle of making applications, learning how this works, I want to try and give the most useful information possible. And if you're not applying right now, at least you'll have a bit of insight, for years to come. So, without any further ado, let's get started. And I want to start here on my presentation slide that looks slightly like I'm promoting Brexit, which I promise I'm not, but just to talk a little bit about the UK, right, as a place to study, a place to work, right, and a place that you hopefully will be coming to in the future. So, there's a reason you're here tonight, right, that universities like LSE have a fantastic reputation, right, all around the world. So if you are choosing to come to the UK, what you can be sure of is that if you're coming, for a master's degree, a PhD, whatever it is, that lots of the universities you're going to be studying at or considering are places that are really well known, right, all around the world. I think, aside from the reputation, the other thing that is really important to say about UK universities is definitely a little bit different to Columbia, is that we approach education in a really specialised way. So for you to come as a master's student to the UK, obviously it's going to be really, really specialised, but even more so than other countries. So from the very first day you arrive at university in the UK, you are focused in on maybe just one subject or one topic. And what that means is you're specialised from the start, but it also means that our degree programmes are a little bit shorter than other countries. So a master's degree in the UK is normally just 1 year. Our bachelor's degrees, right, are only 3 years. So it's specialised, and that makes things like a little bit quicker. But aside from that, I think, skipping over the culture, because I'll come back. The UK is obviously a really good choice as well if you're thinking about your career. So the UK, even after Brexit, is, really the sort of capital of Europe in terms of industries, all kinds of different industries, right? Yes, people think about law and finance, but London is such a creative hub as well, and a hub for enterprise. And actually, I had a really interesting conversation the other day, which was about this expert in AI, and he said that he thinks London is the best city in the world for startups, right? So there's a lot going on in London in terms of thinking about your career and work opportunities. But the other side of that, of course, is then around the visa. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of stories in the news in recent months and years about immigration and about visas in certain places. The UK is still very welcoming, right, towards students and towards students who want to stay after they've graduated. So if you come to study in the UK, you can work while you are studying, okay? So the student visa allows you to study for at least 20 hours, at most 20 hours a week during the semester. So while you're going to classes, while you're going to lectures, you can have a part-time job, right? And that could be a part-time internship to, advance your career, or it could just be a job in Starbucks, right? Whatever you need, whatever you want to do. But then during the vacations, the limit is completely lifted. So you can have a full-time job, you can have a full-time internship, right? In any sector, in any organization you want. You don't have to work at the university. Once you then graduate, you would then be eligible for something called the graduate route visa. And what the graduate route visa allows is for you to stay in the UK for at least 2 years, okay, after you finish. So let's say you finish and you like the idea of staying in London, gaining some experience, right? Finding an internship, finding a job, you can do that. You will have the same employment rights, right, as if you were British, okay? You don't need a company to sponsor you. You're not going to lose your visa if you don't find a job straight away. And I think that's really important to say because, particularly in places like the US, once you graduate from the US university, you can also stay, but there is a time limit on finding a job. And again, we've all been watching the news. You see what happens if you don't get visa sponsorship in that time. I shouldn't joke about that, sorry. But you get the picture, right? In the UK, even if it takes you 6 months to find your perfect job, that is completely fine. And I will just add at this point really quickly as well, that if you are successful in getting a Cultura scholarship, they are also happy for you to stay, okay, for those 2 years. Eventually, you don't have to come back unless you want to pay the whole thing back to Cultura, but you can do those 2 years after you graduate. And now, just out of interest, who here has been to London? What at the back? What do you think of London?
Oh, it's my favorite city in the world.
Correct answer. I didn't tell her to say that. Okay, just for everyone online, we've just heard that London is your favourite city in the world. Is that right? Okay. Anyone? Who else had their hand up? Yeah. What do you think? This is again for people online. We've just gone from best city in the world to you had the happiest day of your life. Why? I've got to ask one. Okay, we'll talk later. And then we can put it in the LSE brochure for next year. Well, these are really good answers. Thank you to my question. I think I've told this story if you've done one of my events before, but I did a presentation like this maybe like a year ago now. And in the presentation, I asked the same question, right? I said, who's been to London? What do you think about London? What words would you use to describe London? And a girl just put her hand up straight away and just shouted, dirty. So these are much better answers, thank you. But I agree, London is my favourite city in the world. And I'm allowed to say that because I'm from Manchester. I'm not from London. Manchester is horrible compared to London. It's fine, but it's not London. Right. And you will know if you visited, right? There is so much in this amazing city. The history, the culture, the food. The food is good. Okay. I promise. I don't want you looking at me like that. The food is good. Okay. Not British food, but everyone else's food is very, very good in London, right? You will not find a better curry outside of India, better Italian outside of Italy, right? I promise the food is really good. But the reason I'm saying all this is because, yes, people visit London and they do the tourist stuff, Harry Potter World, right? King's Cross. going and looking at stolen art in the British Museum, all of the fun stuff, right? But people often don't then think, well, what's it actually going to be like, to live there, to study there for an entire year? Or if you do a PhD, right? 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So I just want to assure you that genuinely, London is a city of students. Across the entire city, there are over 600,000 students, right? There are countless universities. And what that means is that there are so many resources for you to use as a student. Libraries, universities, research centres, but also the more fun stuff, right? Student bars, student nightclubs, free entry to events, cheap food, whatever it is, right? But here's the problem, I think. Well, not a problem, but let me tell you, if you come to London, you are going to learn this, right? This is, what is this? It's the Tube. Thank you so much. Using the True London. This is the Tube network. And every time I come to Bogota, I always just check, how is your metro going? When is that going to be finished? 2027. Yeah, is it actually going to be finished this time? Because every time I come, this like, maybe next year, maybe the year after. Anyway, okay. The reason I wanted to show this is, first of all, just to show you where LSE is. So LSE is right in the middle of the city. The Covent Garden is right here. So shopping, theatres, that kind of part of town, which you definitely visited if you've been to London. We're about 20 minutes from Parliament down here, Westminster. The London Eye is like kind of here. So really, really central. But here's the problem you have, okay? If you want to go to London to study, and you're really sure, really confident that London is the place you want to go to, that still leaves you with about 40 universities. Within a mile of LSE, you can see, maybe 2 miles, there's about 15 other universities. And so look, some of these universities will be very big. Some will be very small. Some will be very specialised, like LSE. Some will offer lots of subjects. Some might be full of Colombians. Some might have no Colombians, right? And so actually the hard thing you have to decide is which university is right, because all of these are really good in different ways, but all of these universities on screen are fantastic. And so the hard thing is not, finding a good university, because there are good universities in every city on earth, but it's finding the right one. So what I'm going to do, before we talk about, how this all works in terms of applications and next steps, I want to spend just a couple of minutes explaining what makes LSE different to all of these other universities. Okay? And look, I am self-aware enough to know that every university will have someone like me who goes around the world saying, we are so special, we are so unique, right? But LSE actually is. And the reason is because we are the only university in the UK, and one of very few universities in the world, that is dedicated to the social sciences. So the way I want you to think about this is like this. There are so many universities you can go to study a master's in economics, a master's in politics, a master's in law, a master's in international relations. But there is only one university where every single person around you is interested in the same thing that you are, which is fundamentally, if you're a social scientist, the thing you care about is how does our society work? And that is why every single person is at LSE, because they are interested in understanding how our society works. And actually, not to sound too moral about this, but 9 times out of 10, in my experience, when someone is interested in how society works, is because they want to make it better, right? And so people come to LSE for a very clear reason. And I want to stress, right, that economics is in our name. It's a big part of who we are and what we do, but that is far from the only thing we're interested in at LSE. And so just to talk through kind of the things we do at LSE, I've put on screen some examples of some of the research produced by our academics, right? So remember, these would be the people teaching if you come to LSE. And so just to pick on a few examples, there's a chap down here called Nicholas Stern. Has anyone heard of Nicholas Stern? No, I don't. Okay. Nicholas Stern is a really important guy. And I'm going to make a bet with you that in 50 years' time, if I'm still doing this job and using the same presentation slides, God help me, okay, if I ask that question, do people know Nicholas Stern? I think everyone in the room will say, because he's a really important guy now, but I think he's going to be remembered even more importantly. The reason is, okay, Nicholas Stern was the first person in history, in any country, at any point in time, right, to write a report, and this was in 2004, I think, so over 20 years ago now, about how climate change was about to completely remake the world economy and what that was going to mean for people's jobs and their consumption habits and the industries, we work out travel and all these things. So this is to say, yes, you can come to LSE to study climate change from a social, economic, political perspective, right? Equally smart from my side, this book is brilliant. I don't get commission for saying that, I promise, but I genuinely really love this book. He's a journalist who also teaches at LSE, and he's an expert on social media, basically, right? But how social media affects our politics. So in this book, right, which is a few years old now, but it's still so relevant, he talks about Trump for the first time. He talks about the B word. There's no mention of Brexit in this room. And he talks about, what we're seeing right now today, both in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, which is how do your online communities and the voices that are amplified to you shape your perception, right, of who belongs to your group or who doesn't belong to your group, and then what consequences does that have for your voting and your politics, right? So this is to say you can come and study politics and voting and psychology, right? And finally, one more, I want to point out as well that we have Paul Bowman. He is head of our psychology department, and he's an expert on happiness, right? But particularly thinking about how we build societies where people feel happy, so they feel they have value, they have purpose, they have meaning, right? So this is all just to say, yeah, you can come to LSE, do macroeconomics, do econometrics, that kind of stuff. But the social sciences touch so many areas of our lives. And actually, I would make the case that the social sciences are more important today with the technological change, the failures of democracy we're seeing all around the world, than it ever has been before, right? These questions about how we organise our society are more pressing today than I think they ever have been. And that is what we do at LSE. That's what we're about. A couple of other things to say. We're a small university, right? So we're specialists and we're small. So we only have 12,000 students in total, which might sound like a lot, but compare us to King's College London, that's right next door, they have 45,000. UCL down the road, it's 55,000. And what's interesting about LSE, most of our students are postgrads. There are more masters and PhD students at LSE than the pre-grads, right, the bachelor's students. So if you were to come for a master's or PhD, most people would be in the same situation as you, right? A little bit older, having already been to university at least once, kind of coming to just even further enhance your kind of knowledge. If you've been to any of my presentations before, you know that I love talking about this. And the reason is, this is right in the middle of LSE campus. There's this huge globe. And we just had the start of our semester, right, a couple of weeks ago. Like, people queue up by this to take their new LinkedIn photo on the first day, or to take a photo they can send to mum or dad or whoever it is, right, back home. It's like a really well-known thing of LSE. And we have this for at least two reasons. The first reason is that LSE is the most internationally diverse university in the UK. We are one of the most internationally diverse universities in the world. So to put a number on that, if you come to us for a master's, 80% of the people in your class will not be British. So 80% of everyone at LSE is not from the UK, meaning there are more students in your situation coming a very long way to London than like me being from Manchester, right? Which is, again, pretty amazing in terms of the people you meet and the connections and the languages and all of these things. But the second reason I love showing this is because I don't think there is a better visual image for what LSE is all about, who we want to be as a university. And the reason is, right, this is a piece of art, and it's called The World Turned Upside Down. And when you think about the world, you often think of the map, and the USA is at the centre, or the UK is at the centre, or Europe is at the centre. And this is really asking, well, what does the world look like from a different point of view? If you are not from those places, with those ideas, with those histories, how might things look different to you? And that's what we're about, right? When we talk about our diversity, it's not that, it's like, okay, great job, Nathan, you got 10 students from Columbia this year, 20 from Germany, and 30 from France. It's not about that. It's we want you to bring your voice with you. We want you to bring your ideas with you and your histories, right? And look, you are going to be in classrooms with people who think very different, but that's what's exciting, right? You will be in classrooms with people from the US and China and India and Europe and the UK, right? And Ghana. And everyone is bringing their own voice, right, to it. I won't labour the point too much, but I do obviously just want to flag the fact that because we're so international, we really punch above our weight in terms of producing world leaders, not just in the UK, but around the world. So I don't know where we get the number 40 from. Someone's counted at some point. But by our estimation, 40 world leaders have studied at LSE. There's at least one person on there I won't need to introduce. But other than Juan Manuel Santos, people like Ursula von der Leyen, people like Kwame Nkrumah, the first Prime Minister of Ghana, that is the President of Barbados today, that is the President of Finland, the current President of Taiwan studied at LSE. People don't even realise John F. Kennedy registered as an LSE student, right? And so you get my point that people genuinely come from all around the world. And often then they will go back to their home countries or travel or whatever it is, and make a difference, not just in their own lives, but in the lives of the people around them, in their communities, in their countries. Final thing, and then we'll talk about the more complicated stuff, is what happens after you graduate, right? Because hopefully you agree with me that education is an investment, right? Even if you do get, can I have my bottle one-handed? Yeah. I went quite London then in a bottle. Anyway. Yeah, even if you get a full scholarship, right, from Confitero, and most of your financial costs are covered, right, that's still a year where you're not working, right? You've not got an income, or maybe you do have an income with a part-time job, but you know what I mean, right? So no matter how you look at it, there's a financial cost go to you. But even more importantly, this is a year of your life, right? If you do a PhD, it could be 6 years of your life, where what you are doing is waking up every single day and saying, okay, today and tomorrow and the day after, I'm happy to wake up and learn about this for an entire year or for 6 years or whatever, right? So you're making a big investment of not only money, but time, right? And so I think you're really entitled to ask questions like, if I'm making this investment, what's on the other side? And obviously, there's lots of ways you can measure the value of your education. And I'm not saying it's just about your career, but one way of measuring this is what our students do right after they leave us and how this affects their future and their prospects. So what you can see on screen, and people at the back, I'll talk you through this, but this is a ranking of UK universities from this year by graduate prospects. So graduate prospects, how quickly people find jobs, average starting salary, quality of those employers. And you can see, and I will always mention this because I'm a very small and bitter man, that LSE ranks higher than Oxford and Cambridge on those measures. Meaning that on average, students who go to LSE will get jobs faster for more money at better companies than people who went to Oxford and Cambridge, right? And in fact, the only reason there's one university above us, does anyone know why? No? Any guesses? This is a hard question. Only one person has ever got. You look like a smart man. Go on.
Maybe for
Completely wrong. No, so the reason Imperial is ranked number one is because they really just teach medicine and engineering, right? And you can fall out of bed and find a job as an engineer or a doctor, right? So let's say, at least in this room, LSE is number one, okay, in the UK. Our graduates are genuinely in very high demand. We find that about 25% of our students will end up in kind of financial jobs. Of course, that number is higher in certain areas. So our finance students, economics students are more likely to go into those areas. But overall, about 25%, will end up in financial jobs. The other 75% go everywhere, all over the place. So actually, one of the top destinations for our students is into government, as you might expect, and into international organisations as well. We get huge numbers of journalists at LSE, huge number of people working on policy and consultancy, entrepreneurs. LSE's produce more unicorns than any other UK university. So it's also, students go into business after they've left us. And so what I want to say is, I think having LSE behind you doesn't necessarily limit, the direction of travel. In fact, like we had a couple of years ago, our first alumni to win an Oscar, right? And they won that for film editing. I think they studied something like finance, right? So it doesn't necessarily limit you onto a certain path. Our careers service is really good at helping you kind of figure this out. So they will, of course, organise events for you to meet employers. And let me tell you, employers fight to come to our events. I'm not overemphasizing that. People really fight to come and meet with our students. And the example I always like to give is we are the only university in the UK that has an international organisation. The reason we're the only university is because we are the only one that all of these people will agree to come to on the same day. So on one day at LSE, on campus, to promote internships, to promote jobs, all of these things, we have the UN, we have the World Health Organization, we have the IMF, we have the EU, we have the NATO, Medicine Sans Frontières, and a whole range of others, right? We come to our campus for one day to meet our students. This is such a big deal, by the way, I learned this recently, that Cambridge send their students on a bus to our event. Okay? So even if you're not interested in those sectors, again, I need to be careful what I said first. It shows you the level we're looking at. So there'll be those events, but then there's also a lot of work around one-to-one support. So if you can book careers consultant appointments with careers consultants throughout your time at LSE, you can go and do interview prep, assessment centre prep. It could be everything from you're just kind of interested in a career, or it could be really detailed, like I have to sit this test for this company. How do I prepare? And what's nice is after you graduate, you can actually keep using all of this for 5 years. So after you leave, what sometimes happens is people go and get a job they really thought they wanted. And it's actually interesting to see which companies keep coming up. And they really, after a year, they hate it, right? And we would say to those people, well, come back, book an appointment, come to some events, let's think about how you can transition, right? Or change path. So that's the main stuff about LSE. What I want to do now for the next, probably half an hour we have, is give a little bit more detail on that, okay? So we'll talk first just a little bit about the programmes, not too much because we have so many. We'll then talk a little bit about how kind of Colfatero fits into this and the scholarships fit in, and then we'll end with the hard part, which is how to get it. So if you did meet me at the fair, yesterday, was it yesterday? Feels like a mess, so long ago. My voice is still a bit sore from shouting at you all, so I apologise. But I mentioned at the fair that LSE, we are just one faculty, okay? So there's just one university, everyone is employed by the same people, right? We are one faculty. But within that, there are about 25 different teaching departments. So what you can see on screen are essentially the subjects that you can study at LSE. And the point I like to make is that there will be subjects there that, most universities have: economics, government, maths. But because we're a more specialised university, we also have some quite nerdy, specialised departments. Things like behavioural science, right, as a kind of distinct entity. Things like economic history. And actually at the graduate level, there are these departments in yellow are only for masters and PhD students. And again, you can see even more specialised areas like European studies, health policy, public policy, right? So there's a lot to LSE. Within those departments, there are almost 200 postgraduate degrees. But I'm not going to go through all of them, okay? because I have a flight tomorrow at 4 p.m. and I think we would still be here. But I will give just a few points about, how these are kind of. So the first thing to say is that obviously, me doing a history degree at LSE is going to look very different to someone who does a maths degree, right? Or does a finance degree. Each course is going to be tailored to the subject. But the main features of most of our programs would be that really most of the activity happens around kind of small classes. So most master's classes will be maybe 10, probably maximum 15, unless it's a Harvard style, students per class. And really the idea of those classes, right, is you've been to the lectures and you've listened to the professors, you've gone away, you've done some research, maybe you've worked on a project, maybe you've worked with classmates on something, maybe you've had to do a book review, I don't know, right? And you turn up to class and it's your space. So the classes are really debates, right? What we always say is that, look, in the classroom, the classes shouldn't actually be talking, right? Because it's your space. You've heard what they have to say. Now it's time to bring your opinion in, right? And start fights with your classmates. Ideally not physically. I've seen some heated debates, sorry, at LSE. Now what I would say is that, of course, you're coming to an academic university. So yes, you are going to be reading research papers. Yes, you're going to be attending lectures and thinking about theory, right? The kind of more traditional academic side of things. But then we're also very interested in making sure that you leave university not just with information in your head, right? Because who needs that now, right? But it's more about the skills you have and your ability to apply what you know. So most of our programs will do work, right, either with employers or with some kind of relevant, more applied, use of your skills. So the example I like to give is that if you come to LSE to study public policy, okay, what we do is you have to do something called a capstone project. And a capstone project is where we would partner you up with a government agency. So that could be Ministry of Education in the UK. It could be European Union Trade Bureau. It could be some wing of the United Nations, right? And you have to work with the staff in that agency to research a policy problem they are having and design your own policy, represent it to them. And so you're actually using the theory, what you've learned, in a very real world scenario. Same is true of students who take management, right? You have to compare it with some kind of management, some kind of organization, and you get the idea. Moving on to and the only other thing, sorry, I should have mentioned, of course, most master's degrees are just 1 year. Okay, I think I already mentioned that, but just to really emphasize, normally just one. Moving them on to PhD, obviously this is an even bigger commitment. Most PhD students will be with us for at least 3 years. I've met PhD students where it's taken 10 years. Please don't go into it with the idea that it's going to take them 10 years. Okay, please don't. A decade. Okay, but the norm is at least 3 years. It can be 4, 5, 6, depending on your research, depending on what you need. Everyone moves at a different pace. Obviously, it's a big commitment, but the exciting thing about doing a PhD is that at the end of your time, you are probably the world-leading expert on whatever you've been studying. You've published normally 100,000 words on a very specialised topic, and there's probably very few people out there who know as much as you do about what you've been researching. And so for that reason, many of our students will stay on in university, in academia, doing teaching, doing research, lecturing, but there's also no reason you can't take those skills into other areas. So the example I always like to give is that actually the number one destination for our PhD economists is not into academia. They go most often to the World Bank, right? So they will go to the World Bank where they're designing policy, conducting research, those kind of things. Here would be the first really important piece of advice to know, okay? Which is that, like I said, we have about 200 degree programs at us. Rather than going through them all, or let's say just looking in the Department of Economics and then just looking in finance or whatever, right? I would suggest if you go on our website and you look at the graduate programs, there's a search box at the top of the page. I would actually recommend search by topics you're interested in. Okay? So as an example, I just typed in the word development. So you're interested in development studies. And you can see there are 90 degrees where you will study some aspect of development at LSE. Now, the reason I'm using this as an example is because actually we have development degrees outside of the international development department. Okay? So as an example, you can see we have health, right? Now that's co-taught with the health policy department. So if you just looked at international development, you might miss that, right? So we have, a mixture of quite specialised programmes. They might not always be in the places you expect. So this is a really useful way of just seeing what's out there. And the other point just to make as well is the way we normally work at LSE is each department normally has quite a general master's degree, right? So the Department of Management, Masters in Management, right? And that degree is quite flexible. You do a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. But then we will also have more specialised versions of those same programmes. So management and strategy, marketing, management for entrepreneurship and social innovation, management and economics, right? So have a think whether you want a more general programme or you want something more specialised, okay? When you are looking down these lists, of course, you can then click into these and you can read a little bit more about what the programme involves. This is my first really big tip, okay? The most important section of this page is programme content, okay? Because this is where you will see in detail what you are going to study over the course. I want you to remember I showed you this, okay? Because I'm going to talk about this when we talk about applications. This is so important for your application. And when you're looking down the programme content, you can actually go even further and you can find some really disgusting looking pages like this, where you can actually see which courses you have access to as a student, right? The mandatory courses, the optional courses, and it looks something like this, right? So everyone has to do certain papers, but then you get to pick from this list and you can click into this and read lots more about the course. So this is where I would be looking just to figure out if it is the right degree for you. Because there might be degree programs that share courses, but actually if you realise that, okay, well, I'm not going to do that type of economics because I'd have to do micro as part of it, and I hate micro, maybe pick another degree, or equally, well, I'm not going to do that management program because I really actually prefer the marketing side, so let me pick the degree with more marketing, right? And so this is really useful just to help you figure out what's right for you. And as I've suggested, so important for the application. So I want you to remember I showed you this, okay? Before we do talk about application, let's talk about something even more important, which is how do you pay for this? Because, yeah, I'm sorry, there is a cost to come into LSE. Nothing good in life is free. So let's talk about what this looks like, and in particular, how this matches up with corporate touring. So you can see on screen the costs of our degree programs this year. It really varies, right? So some of our degrees might be £18,000, and then some of the most expensive ones, like a Masters in Finance, are like £50,000. Okay? So it really varies. Most degrees fall in the middle. So I would say a typical LSE Masters degree would be 28, 29, £30,000. Okay, is about average for most of our programs. I will come back to this in a second, right? On top of that, you need to live, okay? And we would suggest that you need about £1,500 a month to live comfortably in London. So by comfortably, I mean, right, you can pay your rent, you can pay your bills, pay your travel, and also have a bit of money to go to the pub, okay, on a Friday night, okay? So living comfortably. You can do it for cheaper than that, you can spend a lot more money. London has a reputation for being a really expensive city, because it can be, okay? If you are going to expensive coffee shops every day and expensive bars and restaurants and the opera, bourgeoisie activities, you will run out of money so quickly. I don't care who you are, right? It's a very easy city to spend a lot of money. But what I would say is that living as a student in London is by far the cheapest way to live in London, by far. Okay, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So obviously, students, you're not going to pay tax. Okay? You're not paying council tax. Your income is unlikely to be at the tax threshold. You're not paying all of that stuff. City of students, okay? Everywhere has discounts. Everywhere has free entry for students. Student-only nights, right? Discounted pints, discounted meals, all of those things. And as we've already talked about, you can also work while you study. So you can work for up to 20 hours a week during term time, during the semester. And just to give you an indication, The part-time jobs pay pretty well in London, because it can be a more expensive city. So we have something called the London Living Wage. And actually, the jobs at LSE for students, the entry level pay is £19 an hour. Okay, so and look, we have jobs in our team. People make social media, people help with emails, people go on tours, all these things. But there's also research assistants, library assistants, people work in the gym, right? And the minimum they make is £19 an hour. And so if you just did 10 hours part-time work a week, which is completely manageable, right? That is like over half of your living costs, just from that 10 hours of part-time work a week. Okay, never mind like full-time jobs over the breaks, full-time internships. So what I'm trying to say is the numbers do look intimidating, but it's definitely manageable. And being a student in London is definitely going to be cheaper than if you came on vacation, right? Or if you came to visit at other times. Now, of course, there's a lot of funding out there to support you, through this. It is expensive. It does cost a lot of money. And my advice is always to look at what's available locally, first of all. So we'll talk about LSE scholarships in a minute. But listen, as Colombians, you have access to genuinely some of the best scholarships of any country in the world. Col Futuro makes me wish I was Colombian. I'm not joking, right? What we have in the UK is pathetic compared to what's available for you guys, right? So to introduce Col Futuro, and I'm sure you already know a little bit about this, but obviously it's an organisation that we've worked with now for many, many, many years. LSE was actually the first university in the world to sign an agreement with Col Futuro. So Colombians have been coming to LSE with Col Futuro funding since 1992. In total, there have been over 600 Colombians in those 30 years who've come to LSE with Col Futuro funding. So we are always so honoured to be able to come here and speak to you guys and work with the team here. But essentially, right, Col Futuro will provide up to $50,000 to fund your studies. Now, that initially is a loan, okay? But then by taking certain actions, that will be turned into scholarship, right? So if you come back to Colombia, a bit will be turned into scholarship. If you get a job in a certain sector, if you work outside of Bogota, right? And you can really reduce actually or transform the majority of that loan into a scholarship, right? And whatever is left over is a kind of very, low interest loan, okay? So that's 50,000 guaranteed. What we also provide at LSE is a discount on your tuition fees, okay? So when you're doing your research, keep in mind that the cost for you, when you look at the fees, will be 20% less than everyone else, okay? So it's a kind of co-funding package where Col Futuro will give you the loan, and we will also help, reduce some of the tuition fees to help that loan go a bit further. Additionally, if you are on the Semilleros program, there are also 2 full scholarships for students who are Semilleros, okay? Which would be full tuition fees, as well as the loan if you needed it, right, from Col Futuro. On the website, you might have seen this. There is a really good directory. And often when people come to me and they ask, okay, I like LSE, but I'm not quite sure what I want to study. Have a look at this. So on the Col Futuro website, you can see all the people over the last 30 years who have come to LSE. You can see what they've studied, which university they came from, right? Even, what they whether they came, whether they didn't come. And this is actually a really useful tool, maybe just for getting inspiration, right, of what other people have done and just seeing where other people have kind of gone with their degree. And you can see that, pretty much every university in Colombia is represented on there. Yes, Los Andes, yes, Nacional, but universities from all around the country, people are coming from. So look, please apply to Col Futuro, okay? It would be stupid not to, okay, if you want to come to LSE. What I also want to add is that there are, of course, other scholarships out there. And my advice is always please apply for as much as you can, okay? The further you get in your education, the more people there normally are willing to give you money. But it is a bit of a hustle, right? You apply for as much as you can to all the grants, all the scholarships, because you never know. So Chevening is the other example that I'd really encourage everyone to have a look at. Chevening is funded by the British government. And now this scholarship will pay for everything. Okay, so they'll pay for your tuition fees, they'll pay for your living costs, they'll pay for your visa, your healthcare, your travel, everything. Okay, and every year they fund 1,500 students to come to do a master's degree in the UK. Now, this could be a master's degree in anything. So it could be a master's in finance at LSE or a master's in creative dancing, right, at another university. Doesn't matter what you want to study. But one fact I did want to give you is that of those 1,500, LSE have more achievement scholars than any other university. This year we've got 130 of those 1,500. And again, keep in mind how much smaller we are than most. Part of the reason for this is because, if you are applying for these top scholarships, there is weight, right, given to the university you want to go to. So if you're going to a really high-ranked university with really strong reputation, really strong background in the subject you want to do, then scholarships like this can give you extra credit, right, depending on where you want to go. So this is just to say, there's lots of scholarships out there. LSE students normally are, pretty successful in terms of getting back in. But additionally, I will mention, we also have our own scholarships at the university. There's about 150, 200 in total. And they really, really vary, right? Some of them will be a small top-up. So if you say to us, I need £5,000, we can consider you for that. If you say that you need your full fees and living costs, we can also consider you for that, okay? What I would really recommend is, when you get home, it's not tonight, but at some point in the future, okay, Google the Study UK Scholarship Finder. There is a really good website produced by the British Council that lists every single scholarship at every single UK university, and you can filter it down, right, by like what you want to study and nationality characteristics. So if you, want to come to the UK to study international relations, as much as I want you to come to LSE, if you see that King's College London has a full scholarship for Colombians who want to study international relations, please also apply to them, okay? Because again, apply for as much as you can. You never know what's going to happen. Before I move on from that, does anyone in the room have any questions on scholarships or funding or Cultura in general? There will be time for Q&A at the end, but any questions right now?
Can you apply to an achievement scholarship in case that it's a double degree?
Good question. So just for people online, in case you missed that, so no, you cannot apply for Chevening for 2-year programs. Chevening you can only use on 1-year degrees. Cultura, technically, you can use on degrees as long as you like, but the amount of money doesn't change, right? So obviously your money will take you a lot further on a 1-year degree in Cultura than if you did a 2-year master's.
Is your like college housing, or you have to look for private housing?
Really good question about housing. So we do have available housing for our students. The housing is right in central London. So one of them is right next to the British Museum. One is next to the South Bank. One is by Euston, King's Cross. And yeah, we do have accommodation just for master's students and PhD students, as well as ones that are mixed. So if you want to live somewhere where, there aren't 18-year-olds running around excited because they've just discovered beer, and you want an open environment, you can. What I would say is we don't guarantee it, okay, is a really important thing to say. If you want to go into LSE housing, you want to be early in your application to give yourself the best chance of getting the accommodation you want. So it's a really good point, and I'm going to come back to it on the applications, okay? So I'm going to carry on, because we're already rapidly approaching 7 o'clock, and I'm going to spend the remainder of the time we have getting actually quite detailed on the application. So the reason I want to get quite detailed is because, our application literally opened 3 days ago on Monday, okay? So they have just opened. So my bet is there's at least a few of you in the room and online who are going through this right now, okay? So let me try and cover some of the key stuff that everyone asks me about and hopefully give you some advice on how to write an amazing application, okay? I promise if you listen to me tonight, I can't promise that, but okay, you're not going to get better advice, okay, than this tonight. So in terms of the application, we have just opened on Monday. And if you're applying in future years, keep that in mind. We always apply in October, open in October. To apply, there is a fee, which is currently £95. Now, I know the conversion rate is a nightmare right now. So if this is going to cause problems for anyone, okay, you can request for this fee to be waived. Okay, so there's a form you can complete where you can ask for the £95 to be waived. If you are in that situation, I would encourage you in that application to mention things like you are applying to Cultura, you are applying to achievement. Okay? With the application, you can apply for 2 degrees with 1 application. Okay? That could be 2 masters, could be 2 PhDs, could even be 1 PhD, 1 masters. Okay, it's completely up to you. What happens is you'll have a first choice, and of course we'll consider that first. Okay, and if you're rejected from that first choice, you'll automatically be considered for the second. So actually, what a lot of people do is, remember I said we have the general masters as well as the specialised ones. A lot of people put their first choice as a really specialised one. It's like perfect for them, and then their backup choice is one more general one. Because then if you weren't successful for the really specialised one, you could still maybe be successful for this one, and you could still do like some of that stuff, right, in the general project. There is no deadline. So our master's programmes, at least, operate on a rolling admissions basis, meaning that you close each master's degree one by one as soon as it gets full. So there will be some master's degrees that are still taking applications next June, next July. But some, of course, fill up much faster. The thing that's probably even more important, though, on that, is that although there is a deadline for the master's programmes, there are a deadline for scholarships. There are a deadline for housing. It's going to take you time to apply for your visa, right? So even if, applying early doesn't mean you've necessarily got a better chance of getting in, what it does do is mean you have time for everything else. So my advice is always try to apply before Christmas, okay? October, November, December. You don't need to go home and do it tonight, okay? But try and get it in before Christmas, because then you should get your results, get your decision in plenty of time to be considered, in time to be considered for scholarships, for housing, all of those other things, okay? If you are applying for a PhD, it's a little bit different, and we have deadlines because process is a bit more complicated for you. You'll probably have to do an interview, things like that. Now, within the application, you need 6 things, right? All we ask for, 6 things. First thing is going to be your transcripts or your final certificate, right? From any qualifications you had before. So your bachelor's degree, if you've already done a master's, we'll want that as well. So we can see kind of not just your overall grade, but the different courses you've taken, the grades you got in those courses. I'll come back to the grades we look for. After that, we're going to need 2 references. Now, with the references, the best people who can write you a reference are academics. Okay? The reason is because you're coming to LSE to study, not for a job. And so the best people who can talk about you as a student are people who know you as a student. Okay? So if you can get academic, they are normally better. However, we appreciate that, look, if you left university 10, 15 years ago, all of your professors are probably dead. Right? That's a joke, but there's some truth in that. Okay? And so, if that is your situation, if you have been out of university, normally, for at least 5 years, it is okay to maybe put in 1 professional one instead. Or if you've been out of university for a really long time, you could potentially do 2 professional. If you are going to go professional, again, the other thing to keep in mind is it's normally best if they are related to what you want to study, right? So lawyers asking their lawyer boss to write their law reference, right? Or people who work in finance getting their boss to write their finance reference makes more sense than you getting like your manager when you worked at a cafe when you were 18, right, to write the reference. We also need a CV. I'm going to come back to that in a second. And some of our degrees will also ask you to sit a GRE or a GMAT test. This is not all degrees. It's normally just things like management, finance, accountancy, or slightly more corporate, I think is a fair word, like MBA type programs, okay? I'm going to ask for a GRE or GMAT test. So do check that carefully. PhD students, the most important thing for you is an additional document called the research proposal. This is a really important piece of the application because it allows you to tell us what you want to do in those 3, 4, 5, 6 years you're with us. And it's one of the main things we use to decide on PhD candidates. That isn't going to be something I'm going to focus on tonight, Okay? But if there is anyone in the room or online thinking of applying for a PhD, I would really welcome you to get in touch, and we can always have a chat about that. The final thing on there is probably the most important in the entire application. That's the statement of academic purpose. And again, I'm going to come back to that in just a second, because that requires a little bit more explanation. So on those grades, we publish on our website our standard entry requirements. So the grades we think you need, right, to be successful at LSE. And we always express these, of course, in the UK grading system. The UK grading system makes no sense whatsoever. Like, the highest mark you can get in the UK is 70 out of 100, right? So on the website, what you'll find instead is a translation of what this looks like for Colombian grading system, okay? So for our master's requirements, normally we're going to ask for at least a 3.8 in your pre-graduate or licenciado, and for PhD, a similar kind of grade, 4 out of 5, if in your master's degree. I really want to stress that, grades are, in fact, I would suggest, not the main thing we care about at LSE, okay? In our opinion, if you are hitting this level or better, you are good enough for our university. But the thing is actually most people applying are getting these grades. Right? We see people every year with flawless GPAs, flawless grades, and in a sense, that's good for them, but other things matter to us. So the way I want you to think about this is really your starting point with admissions, right? If you're at this level, that almost like gets you through the door in front of the panel. What gets you the place, what will get you the offer, is everything else in the application. Okay? So don't worry too much about this. I've equally, not to go on too much, I've equally seen students with slightly less than this be successful because other parts of their application are so strong. Now, if you're on a 2 GPA, that might be slightly different. That's going to be very hard, okay, for you to make up for that. But just to say, if you're on a 3.6, 3.7, there's potentially room to work there. Now, a common question we get, and this links to the CV, is around work experience. So, of course, as I say, you're going to have to send us a CV. But we're not going to be like strict on how you approach this, okay? There's not like a template you need to use. Just follow good practice, okay? It's going to be 1 page or it's going to be 2 pages. However, keep in mind, you do not need to provide a detailed overview of your education. Why? Why do you not need to give us a detailed overview? Correct, exactly. Okay, so people waste space, right? Like listing out all their courses and their grades. Don't need to do it. It's just enough to put the name of the university, the overall grade, and then use the rest of the space wisely for other things. So actually, the CV is a good place to put everything that doesn't really fit anywhere else. So if it's like a great thing about you, or you have great skill, but maybe it's not like you can't really link it to the degree, so you're not going to put it in the statement. It's a great place to catch everything, okay, that you want to say about you, but couldn't mention elsewhere. Some people really panic about this and they think, okay, LSE's, do I need to put my photo in it? Do I need to put my LinkedIn in it? All these things. What that QR code will take you to is the advice we give to our students on what a good CV looks like. So if you were really, really worried about this, okay, one approach would just be follow the advice that we give our students on CVs, because we'll be happy with it, okay? Now, work experience, okay, is not a requirement on 99% of our degrees. There is only a very small number that will say you need 1 year's experience, you need 5 years experience, those kind of things, all right? Most of our degrees are really flexible. If you come to LSE, there will be people in your class who come straight from university, okay? There'll be 21-year-olds, right, who've never worked a day in their life. There'll be other people who have been in work for 5, 6 years. That's what I did before I did my master's. There'll be other people, right, who could be in their 70s, 80s, and are just doing a master's for fun. So work experience isn't necessarily a requirement, but what I would say is it can bring value if you talk about it in the right way. Okay, so it's not, we don't look for, ticking boxes, or this person's got an internship, this one hasn't. It's more whether you present those experiences in a way that's valuable, right? To, what you're going to bring to LSE. And I think the other obvious point to say is that all of your applications will look slightly different depending on what stage your life is at. Okay, so if you are sat here tonight and you are 21, 22, and you've just left university or about to leave university, obviously you're not going to spend that long in your statements, right, talking about your career, okay, because you're just getting started. But if you're sat in the room or sat online and you're 55 and you've been working for the last 30 years, that's probably going to be something you talk about a lot more than actually your university days, right? Because it's more relevant. So there isn't, a perfect balance between talking about work experience, talking about your education, because everyone will be different. But please don't worry about what anyone else is doing, okay? Because people are at different stages, they've got different experiences. Don't try not to compare yourself to what other people might do or say. Hello.
So,
Hi, Chris.
experience requires about from school policy.
Yeah.
It's including postgraduate studies here in Colombia, or for instance, some research in think tanks and something like that. Do you know about it?
Yeah, really good question. Just for anyone online who didn't hear that. So it's the final bullet point on there. The School of Public Policy requires policy relevant experience. But that's deliberately quite a vague term, okay? Because we believe that policy relevant experience can come from all kinds of places. So I'll give you an example, okay? We get people who come to the School of Public Policy and they might be wanting to think about health policy, and they're nurses, right, or they're doctors. And they are looking and experiencing the impact of policy every day in their job. Or we get teachers, right? Or we get researchers, or we get soldiers, we get policemen, right? Who are, living in the world of policy, but not necessarily making it. So I guess why I'm trying to say this is because if you can justify your experiences of being relevant to policy, unless you say something insane, right? I'm an ice cream man. I sell ice cream, and they said maybe you could even do that. I don't know, right? So if you can justify it, okay, we'll count it and we'll listen. Okay. A couple of other things. English. So of course we want to know that your English means that you're going to be able to cope with being a student. Reading and studying in English every day is hard, right? It's different to learning it. I'm learning Spanish right now very slowly. And for me to read Spanish, right, is a very, very different thing to listening and understanding it. So we accept all kinds of tests. Our degrees will either be standard or higher level. The standard ones are like the courses like maths and stats, where the people don't really want or need to speak to each other. But of course, if you're in international relations, history, law, you're going to need a high level of English. So you can see on screen what we look for. The IELTS is normally a 7, Cambridge C1, TOEFL 100. This is really important, guys. I'm sharing this with you now because it's something I'm asked about a lot. You don't need this when you apply, right? So when we assess your application, we don't consider your English, right? So this isn't something we are thinking about when we get your application. If you've got the test now, great, send it to us. It saves the problem later. But if you haven't, what we would just say to you is, great, you can come to LSE in September, but before then, you need to get one of these tests. Okay, so it'd be a conditional offer. So actually, what I normally recommend is if you feel you need more practice, or you want to get a tutor, or you need to sit a test, right? I would actually say wait until after Christmas. Do the application now, get that done, get it all finished, get it sent, and then focus on these things afterwards. Once you know you've got something to work towards, right? Those grades. Now, of course, different scholarships can have different requirements on this. So if a scholarship says, no, you need a test now, that sucks, but you'll have to do that for them now. But for us, we're a bit more relaxed, okay? As long as you have this by the time you arrive, that's good for us. This is, the really important bit to take us into this final section on the statement. So as I've already suggested, grades are genuinely not the only thing we think about. They're probably not even the main thing we think about when making a decision, okay? We genuinely will consider you as a whole candidate. So just to be really clear on what that means, we don't get all the applications and then remove all of the students who are not in the top 50% of the grades, right? Even if you applied and you had a 2.0 GPA, right, we would still read your entire application before making a decision. There's no automated rejections. There are no automated decisions based on work experience, grades, on English, any of those things. So our selectors, when they're reading your application, will have your CV, your references, your statement, your transcript all together as a package. And in that sense, we do look at you as a whole candidate. And what I think is important to say is that really the main way you have to speak to us as a university and get across why you are such an amazing candidate is the statement. And this is why I genuinely believe it is the most important thing in the application, because you can fix problems elsewhere in the application through the statement, right? If your grades aren't so good in certain ways or your experience is lacking, right? The statement is how you can address it. So the statement of academic purpose with the basics to start with. It's 2 pages, okay? Within that, we set a word limit of no more than 1,500. I'm going to say sort of between 1,000 and 1,500. It's about that, okay? But that's all we're going to tell you, okay? Otherwise, it's really up to you how you approach this. We have some key questions that, we'll talk about in a second, but this is really, your document to write as you want to approach it. Now, it's 2 pages. The really important thing to stress, though, is that this is an academic document, right? The UK system looks for very certain things in applications, and this varies quite considerably to other countries, particularly the USA. Okay? So when it comes to writing your statement, at least 80% of what you write really needs to be focused on the degree you're applying. So why you want to study with that degree, okay? So the questions we recommend are things like, what are your motivations and goals? How have your experiences prepared you to study this degree? And what are you going to bring to the classroom? For most of the degree, you're really engaging with your student experiences, your ideas, your motivations, right? The space left over, the 20%, is all the other stuff that's great about you, right? And your life story and where you see yourself going and those things. But it's never the focus for the UK, right? The academics are always the focus. Now, one point I'm just going to make very quickly is that you can write a different statement for each degree you apply to, okay? So I would strongly encourage you to do this. Even if you copy and paste bits between the two, it's completely okay, right? But you are really writing this document with just one master's program in mind or just one PhD, and then you can write a slightly different version with the other degree in mind. Now, the big mistake, or not mistake, the thing that people let themselves down on is students, not just in Columbia, actually, it's really common in Columbia and Peru and Chile, write their application for LSE like we are a US university. It's a really common thing we see. And so what I just want to show you, I had a good chat the other day with my friend ChatGPT, and I asked my best friend, honestly, I asked ChatGPT, could you please, my best friend, compare or tell me what Yale University looks for in applications for their Masters in Public Policy? And next to that, please could you tell me what LSE looks for in the Masters in Public Policy? And I think it was actually quite interesting. Like, you could try this and see what it says. But I just want to point out a few things to you, okay, of what the US looks for and what the UK looks for. US universities are looking for things like public service. They are looking for people who, present themselves as leaders in their community, that they have certain values, certain morals, that they are a strong global citizen, right? The US universities want the people, right, who genuinely say in their application, I am going to change the world, right? That is what universities in the US look for. They're very value-driven, kind of morality, those kind of things, right? Now, for the UK, again, you can just see the difference in the words that ChatGPT presents, right? Analytical problem solvers, people who use evidence, critical thinking, policy solutions. You can see the difference right away, right? The US is thinking about you as a person, We are thinking about the US, and you see the difference, right? US, about your values, who you are. UK, basically, what kind of student are you? Are you going to be a good student, okay, when you come to LSE? Now, I have 3 tips for you, and I'm going to run through the 3 of these, okay? So, in the statement, the first thing that I would really encourage you to do is to, first of all, think really carefully about why you are doing this. Okay? Think about why you are applying to this master, what you hope to achieve at the end. Because we get tons of people, right? And I've seen so many statements where literally what they say is, I want to do this because I want my boss's job in like 5 years. And now it's fine. But like, tell us what you want to do. So you're learning all this amazing stuff. So do you want to go into a certain sector? Do you have a certain goal in mind? Like, is there certain topics that you're really fascinated by and you want to learn about? Get nerdy, get precise, because the people reading your applications are all either former teachers, former academics, former researchers. So don't be afraid of, alienating the person who's reading your application. Get detailed, get nerdy, right, in what you talk about. The second thing is really try to bring your own voice into what you write. Okay? Because I would suggest that the main skill we look for in our students are people who are independent thinkers. Right? If you ask a teacher, if any of you are in university now, and you ask your teacher, which students are your favourite, I bet most teachers, most professors will tell you it is those people who come into class and they put their hand up and they will argue with me and tell me why I'm wrong and put their voice across. And that's what we look for, right? We want people who, are going to turn up to class and have things to say. So what I would suggest is, some students, they list, they use the statement as a chance to list like all the things they've ever read, right? Or all the classes they've ever taken. That doesn't impress us. What impresses us is someone who says, I read this book and I thought it was crap, right? And here's the reason why. Or actually, what this person was saying on the news yesterday, well, the theory really doesn't back that up. Or actually, what my professor taught me in undergrad, kind of right, but maybe you could apply it in an interesting way or change it some way, right? So in the statement, you are not just listing all your accomplishments. Give us a sense of what you'll be like as a student, right? So if you mention a book, if you mention a lecture, make sure that you bring your own voice into it, okay? And finally, always try to link back to the course. So you remember I showed you the program structure section, okay? With all the courses you take in the degree, I showed you that before, okay? Here would be my advice on how to start your statement, okay? When you get home tonight, or at some point before you apply, I want you to go to that program structure page. I want to look at all the courses available to you, and I want you to write a list of everything that you think you would take if you were to come, right? So there'll be some mandatory courses you definitely know you're going to have to take, but then there'll be some optional ones as well, okay, that you get to pick from. And make a little list of what you think you're going to study if you come to LSE. Try and talk about all of those things at some point in the application, okay? And this is what I mean by linking back to the course. Because we get loads of applications, right, that say things like, I want to come to LSE because it's really multicultural and it's like really high ranked and London's a really great city. And actually, like, you could almost change the name LSE to any other university name and it would still work. What we want to know is, right, you're applying to our Masters in Economics. There's probably 10,000 Masters of Economics courses out there. Why this one? And so we look for those people who say, okay, well, look, one of the reasons I want to come and do your Masters is because I get to study this particular area of economics, right? Or, in the international development degree, I'm really looking forward to doing the health economics course, right? And working with this professor or learning about this. And you might say things like, I already know a bit about this, right? I've written a degree on it, written a paper on it, or I've got work experience, right? So what you're trying to do is, be really clear in your motivations, bring your voice into it, then always linking it to actually what you're going to study. And I promise you, this will take you 95% of the way with this. And so actually, if you are struggling to start writing your statement, that's how I would start it. do like 5 headings for all the courses you would do, and put some bullet points underneath them, thinking like what you already know, achievements you could talk about, things you want to do in that area. And then you'll have like 5 or 6 paragraph plans in a way, right? With the things you want to do, things you want to say. And then naturally you can turn that into a more coherent piece of writing, introduce some more narrative elements, okay? Statement is hard, okay? If you want to start it in Spanish and then translate it later, that's not a bad idea, okay? Because it can be hard to do this, but it is really important. Now, the final thing I'll say, I've spoken for so long, I'm so sorry. After you've applied, after you've got all this done, it normally takes about 8 weeks to hear back from us, okay? That's normal. Some degrees might be faster, it could be longer. So this, again, is another good reason to apply early, because if you think it's going to take you 8 weeks to hear back, you want to make sure you're in time for deadlines for scholarships and housing. PhD applicants, right, will have additional steps, like I've already mentioned, like being invited to an interview, so your process goes on a bit further. And just to link to what I already just said, if you want to be considered for LSE financial support, you must complete our application by the end of April. What I've not also not mentioned there, sorry, is the Call Futuro deadlines. Call Futuro closes in February, I think, yeah. Call Futuro normally closes applications in February. Okay, so what I would do is, again, plan out all the deadlines you need to meet and keep in mind how long we might take to respond. Now, I'm happy to take some questions. Again, I've spoken a little longer than I should have, but just in case anyone needs to log off or head off tonight, I would really encourage you, even if we've spoken before, to scan the QR code on the screen. The reason I encourage you to do this is because by scanning this, you'll get a quick email from LSE that has, you know, some fairly typical stuff about scholarships, courses, applications. But what's slightly more useful on there is my contact details will be at the bottom, and there will also be the ability for you to book a one-to-one appointment with me. Okay, if you want to have a chat about your situation, but your application, I can't look at your application, okay? But if you wanted to have a chat, ask some questions, there's a link at the bottom of that email to book an appointment with me. I will just apologise in advance to say my availability is a bit limited the next few weeks, but I do have some appointments coming up fairly soon. So guys, thank you so much for listening to me. I hope that was useful. I know that's a lot of information. If we have time, I'm happy to take some questions. But otherwise, like, thank you so much. We'll open the floor in a second. And, you know, I just really hope that whether you are online, whether you're in the room with me, you know, I just hope I see you all in London in the next year or two. So yeah, maybe we can start with questions in the room and then go online. So yeah, questions. Helen. Brilliant.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to know more about the template field, or is it just like a long letter? Are there tips that like you suggest?
Yeah, sure. So that was a question about references. So you can't give us the reference because we don't trust just you especially. So the way the references work is all you will do is you will give us a name and an email address. And what will then happen is we will contact your referee. And you don't need to know this, but what is in that email is 2 things. There's a short questionnaire about you, and that asks things like, did they turn up to class on time? Were they in the top 20% of the class, top 10% of the class, top 5% of the class? And then in the second part of the email is where they can upload the letter. Okay, so if they've already written a letter for you in the past, they could always just upload that again. But yeah, you sadly cannot do that. If I could give actually just really quickly one other piece of advice on references, because I think people don't realise you can do this. Having written quite a few references, you know, for people with jobs, but also with postgrad study, my strong recommendation would be when you ask your referees whether they write your reference, give them your statement of academic purpose. Okay, because as a referee, it is really difficult to understand your motivations, your goals, why you are doing this, and how I can help you get, you know, to that point. But if you give me the statement, I will have all the things you kind of like care about and want me to mention. So it's really good practice. Like if your referee is happy to send them the statement, and quite often we find that then they will write a much better reference to support you because they know what you're trying to really good. So I'll just have to wait for the microphone so so we can get everyone.
Will they also have?
Yeah, it will look slightly different. So obviously we're not going to ask your boss, have you the top 5% of the class, or how was their homework, right? But they'll have something similar. So you have to tell us if it's an academic or a professional. Whether
Question. Is people can you support?
really good question. So if you are going to be traveling, and I'm going to extend the question a bit, so for partners, for kids, if you have any kind of what we call UK dependents, okay, there is the possibility of getting a dependent visa for family members. Okay. Now, PhD students are guaranteed, essentially, right, a dependent visa, meaning that your partner, your kids, whoever it is, will get a visa to come with you while you're studying. Okay? On the dependent visa, they can work, they can go to school, they will have access to healthcare, all of those things. For master's students, it's a bit more complicated because for master's students to be eligible to fund dependents, you need to have a scholarship. Okay? So what the government did recently is they limited it so that only scholarship recipients could bring dependents, okay, with them to the UK. So there's some more advice on this online, but that's just the first thing to keep in mind. Master's students, you need to basically make sure you have the backing of a scholarship organisation from the government, those things to be eligible. But then, yeah, we have plenty of people, right, who come with family members. We have accommodation that's suitable not only for couples, but also for families. We have a housing service that can also support you find private accommodation. So if we can't support you with a flat, you and your kids, we can certainly put you in touch with housing providers who can help. And there's also even things like a daycare service that University of London universities like LSE can use and things like that. So there is support out there, but the first key thing just to always double check is around those visa eligibility.
I have a question for the student patients. I saw that the option to make a sample in the work. I'm not sure what is maybe I can give out each paper exactly what.
Yeah, it's a really nice question. So yeah, you're exactly right. PhD students have to provide two extra things. One is the research proposal, which I've already mentioned, and then one is a sample of your written work. Now, normally what we would look for in that is something you have done and had graded. Okay, so the best sample we can get is if we can get a copy of something we did in your master's, your bachelor's, whatever, with comments from whoever graded it. Okay, to show so one that it's not something that you've edited and played with, but also so we can see feedback from staff. It is a flexible thing, so it's something that normally you can discuss a bit later on down the line, because I guess as well, like it would be in Spanish, right, for you. So we'll not have to cross that bridge, but normally, yeah, it's something you've done during your degree recently that matches up with what you want to do in a PhD. Ideally, with some comments from whoever. Yeah.
Do you have an admission rate for the you can understand the listeners for
More money for okay, everyone behave. Or people will charge you a fortune to give you tuition. And so there was a piece of research recently that the average student who does well in the GRE GMAT, on average, spends about 90 hours working towards the test, never mind how much money they spend. So in answer to your question, is there a value in doing it? Yeah, I mean, if you sit it and you get a good result, you tell us about it. But I would suggest you can make much better use of 90 hours and the money you save doing other things and gaining other experiences rather than sitting a test that we're not going to ask for. Okay. Of course, if you need it, sorry guys, you're going to have to do it. It remains a pain in the ass. Yeah, if we don't ask for it, my strong recommendation don't. So I would normally for our PhDs, you need a master's first, right? Is the thing. There are a couple of cases where we've accepted people without a master's, but it's much more common for people to have a master's degree first. So that's the first question I would ask, right? Like, do you need a master's? And if the answer is yes, then obviously that's what you're going to have to do. We do have a lot of students, right, who come for a master's and then stay on the PhD. That would be a separate application, right, to stress. So there isn't like a guaranteed pathway. You are going to have to apply for the PhD in the same way you apply for the masters, during your masters. I think the PhDs, right, they're a much more person-focused application experience than masters, right? Because just to explain what I mean. So, for your PhD, you are going to have maybe one, maybe two academics you work with for most of your time. And so for most PhD students, they have to reach out, right, to those academics before they apply and say, look, I've got this idea, what do you think of it? Like, maybe even, do you want to be my supervisor, right? But if I'm successful. So it's more person-focused in that sense. It's rather than the masters where you're kind of applying for admission, PhD students, it's about that relationship as well, right? You have with the member of staff you're going to work with. So, with that said, if you've already been a student at LSE, right, and you know a professor, and they know you, and you understand their research, and you think you could work well together, that's a good starting point, right, for applying for PhD. Not guaranteed by any means, right? But if you already know someone, you know the landscape of the university, you know who's doing what, that can be beneficial. Not a requirement by any means, okay? So it's not like all of our PhD students did a master's at LSE first, but I guess you just have a bit more working knowledge, right, of the people you might work with and the university, if you've done a master's. Yeah.
Do you think that for certain programs, do people worry about applying heavily, or for every program, people pretty much it's just fine?
Yeah, if you apply by Christmas, you're fine. You're like, yeah. There's none of our programs will be closed before Christmas. So yeah, don't worry too much. And actually, sorry, we tend to not release any decisions until after Christmas anyway, because what we do is it's not like the first person who applies, we just read their application and accept them or decline them. We'll normally wait for a few to come in because it could be a really good year, could be a really bad year, and we want to kind of figure out what the level is for the year and how strong the candidates are. So actually, if you did apply today, you're probably still not going to get a decision until January. So in that sense, take your time, try and get everything done before Christmas, for the benefit of other areas of the application. But yeah, please don't take from what I said that you need to go home and do this now. Yeah.
Two more questions.
Okay.
And the first one is for those courses that require a dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
The dissertation has to be done in the UK, or that can be done like from everywhere else.
So yeah, so you'll remember, of course, we spoke about the degrees are every 9 months or 12 months. If they're 9 months, it's because they don't have a thesis. Okay? Because so the last 3 months of the year for most master's students, you are just working on your thesis, or you're working on your capstone project, or whatever it is, right? That big piece of work at the end of the degree. And so some students stay in London and do that. But if you wanted to come back to Columbia, you can. If you want to go traveling, you can. As long as you submit, as long as you're there for exams in June, July, and then as long as you submit your thesis by the deadline, we're happy with where you can be.
Okay, and the second one. Now, this is regarding you said that the application fee can be waived.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone can apply to that, like that form you showed?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's based on the financial need. Okay, so you're going to have to demonstrate that you cannot realistically afford that fee in your current situation. So look, anyone can apply. That's correct. But it's really intended for people who are really going to struggle to pay that fee. If that's you, great, go ahead. But actually, just for a bit of context, the application fee actually funds scholarships. So it's if you can afford it, I'd encourage you to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But if not, please don't let anyone be put off. Anyone can apply for the waiver, and often it's students who they are going to rely on coffee zero or evening in order to pay for their studies. My pleasure. Was there any questions online? I know we lost people. I'm not sure if we still have anyone. But we can always have a look. But is there any more in the room as well? Yeah.
That they doesn't because
Yeah. So there are some degrees that start a bit earlier than others. So finance is an example. Data science is another. And what these are called are pre-sessional courses. And they're normally things like coding boot camps, or they can be classes to get people up to maths level they need, or it can be even getting people up to the English level they need. And they normally start like 3 or 4 weeks before the main semester. So yeah, that would be counted within your tuition fees, right? Like you don't have to pay extra, that's part of the course. The only thing that would change is you'd arrive a bit earlier than other people. I would obviously need to book your accommodation, book your housing a little bit earlier.
Second first part.
Yeah.
Does it take longer?
No, so basically you cannot submit your application until the fee is paid. Okay. So you can have everything ready, but if the fee hasn't been paid, you can't like hit send. So if you want to request a waiver, what I would suggest doing is maybe submitting that waiver application earlier, when you're starting to write the application, because it could take a few days to hear back. And you're not going to be able to hit send either until you've paid or until we've granted the waiver. Anything else? People, I think, are tired. I'm tired.
It's about the MBA program.
Yeah.
And it's 2 year, one tuition fee is for the 2 years program. Yeah.
Basically, yeah. Okay. So the MPA, it will be the fee for this year and then the fee for next year.
Okay. And about the second year, then it's the internship. Internship, stay, what are the main characteristics of that?
Yeah, so I think by the internship, it's that capstone, right? That capstone we're talking about. So the capstone project lasts for 6 months in the second year of the MPA. So you spend 6 months working with a government department and in whatever. And not necessarily internship, right? But it is, you are directly working with policymakers. And you can, of course, take internships at any point during your studies. So the most, what I would say is common, is students arrive at LSE in September, right? They're studying until Christmas, and then maybe after the break, when they come back, they might have their first internship in Easter, something like that. So, but of course, if you're there for 2 years, it gives you even more time, right, to explore those opportunities.
In the case I receive an unconditional offer, and I understand that there is a deadline to accept the unconditional offer. And I understand that sometimes those deadlines are like sooner than the answer from Futuro or other scholarships. What can we do in those cases? Because I understand when you accept, you have to pay a deposit.
Okay, so a couple of things to say there. So let's say you get your place given to you. We normally say we'd like to hear back from you in about 6 weeks. We would love it for you to tell us within 6 weeks whether you want to extend. That isn't a hard deadline. Okay? If it takes you longer to make that decision, if you are waiting to hear from other universities, your place will not go away. Okay? That offer is yours. That is your place at LSE. We appreciate that people are applying to the universities. We know we're not the only university in the world. Okay. We know people are waiting for scholarship decisions. So that place is yours. Okay. There are a couple of exceptions to that rule. There are a small number of programs that do ask for a deposit. Okay. So things like finance ask for a deposit. Now, because of that, they will likely be more strict on that time frame. Okay. And say, look, no, we're going to give you 6 weeks. It has to be 6 weeks. And there's the deadline. But those are the exceptions. Most degrees do not require a deposit. The other thing I'm going to say is that even if you accept your offer, and we think you're coming and whatever, and then you tell us in September that you're not coming, you are not liable for a single penny. Okay? Even if you arrive at LSE and do 2 weeks of teaching, and you realise after 2 weeks that you hate it, which I hope is the case, right? Even at that stage, you are not liable for a single penny of tuition fees. Now, you might lose the deposit. You might lose the deposit you paid on the house, right, on your visa application, but we will not come after you for tuition fees, okay? It is not, you are not contracted, like, legally to pay us anything until you turn up, you sign that you're a student, you start going to classes, and even then you have 3 weeks to drop out, and you wouldn't have to pay anything. So what I would say is we are flexible on the timeframes. but also don't panic. If course material doesn't work out, if tutoring doesn't work out, you simply would decline your offer, and that's the end of it. Okay, we're not going to come and hunt you down. I will not come to Columbia next year with a shotgun to come and find you. And where's our money? Yeah, okay, guys. I think it's almost bedtime, isn't it? So let's call it a day there. For those online, I'm sorry for the technical problems. We lost you, but thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone in the room for coming out on a Thursday night to come and listen to me. I will see you all at LSE in a couple of years. Come and say hello. You can buy me a pint, okay, for the great advice.